those live and online. I just posted the link to the handout for those who didn't manage to print it earlier. I thought we'd try and learn the. Today we'd try and learn the. You could just put a few of these at the back. Okay. So I thought we'd learn a little bit about Avram's search. Obviously, the figure of Avram now, the towering figure of Avram now appears on the scene. The ends of last week's Parsha's Lech, and then through the next few sedras. And ultimately, to this day, we of course Bnei Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. I think one can argue, incidentally, if we're talking about Avram's search and his move away from Avodah Zarah and paganism towards monotheism and belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and not just belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but the whole system that and beginning of a way of life that he initiated. I think one could put forward a good claim that Avram was the most influential single human in history. If one looks now at a world in which monotheism has more or less retreated near completely, paganism has near completely retreated, and than half the world's population, to some degree or other, ascribe loyalty to the Abrahamic faiths. They see themselves as the faith descendants of Avraham. Clearly, this week's Parsha that describes or tells us a little bit about his journey towards monotheism is an important one, important to look at. I've spoken other years actually about how little the Torah tells us about Avram's thinking process. It's very interesting because in last week's Sedra, he appears pre everything, and he's still living in Haran with his family. In this week's Sedra, he's suddenly a full-blown Novi, hearing messages from Hashem about moving to Eretz Yisrael, and actually we're not told that much about his transition and what he went through. And for that, we sort of leave that to Chazal and Midrashim. And in previous years, I've touched upon this, but maybe I'll elaborate it on again this year. Perhaps we can suggest why there's such a lacuna. Why is there this hole? Why doesn't the Torah tell us much about what Avraham did? So in the sources, if we look at source 1, I won't read the whole of source 1, but the Rambam describes to us the situation of the world pre-Avram, and he describes the deterioration into Avodah Zarah, into pagan practice. Again, it's something I think we've looked at in the past and we can look at on another occasion. But basically, the Rambam says that the world had an awareness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, had an awareness of God pre-Avram. Avram wasn't the first monotheist. I mean, Adam, Noach, these were great figures who had a connection to Hashem as the sole creator of heaven and earth. But humanity found that hard to connect to. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in many respects abstract. It's difficult for us to relate to. Very difficult, very hard to know how we are meant to serve Hashem. All humans feel a need, and we'll come back to this, a need for spirituality and for purpose and for meaning and for transcendence and for direction. But how exactly do we connect to Hashem? And therefore, people began relating to the divine, to that which is beyond, by giving honor to that which is within, physical creation. And they said, surely it would bring honor to Hashem if we gave honor to that which he has honored, to the sun, to the moon, to the stars. And a correct way of expressing spirituality is to recognize the divine within the powers of forces of the natural world. And over time, as people embarked on that sort of spiritual project, they gave ever greater awareness and service to these representatives of Hashem, gradually forgetting that behind these was Hashem himself. So this was a deterioration and a shift away from awareness of Hashem towards paganism. A journey that really started off with the best of intentions, with all goodwill in the world. This was an attempt by people to connect to spirituality, and in the process of so doing, they began giving ever greater glory and worship to the sun, the moon, and the stars, and other forces of power, and thus led to a forgetting of Hashem. Now, the Rambam writes this in his Hilchos Avodah Zarah, in his Halachos Avodah Zarah. It's the very first halacha. It's not just history. So he's not just saying this as a piece of history, as fascinating as it is. The Rambam seems to think that this is bound up to and fundamental to the halachos of Avodah Zarah. Because really what the Rambam is saying is that even though on a halachic level, we treat avodah zarah with absolute abhorrence, and it is amongst the worst of human failings, we should recognize that there are aspects of it that come from a good place. It's not driven solely by evil. The Rambam speaks about this in his Moed Nevuchim also, in which he says that there can be things which are demonstrate a greater decay, a greater spiritual or moral decay, and nonetheless the Torah doesn't treat them with such severity because they don't have such catastrophic results. Avodah Zarah is interesting because for us as spiritual seekers, in some respects, we can be empathetic to the early stages of the service of those who are seeking service of Hashem through means which we consider inappropriate. The long-term result was disaster. It led to complete forgetting of Hashem and the whole corruption and corrosion and destruction of what it means to be Tzelem and Elohim, in one that serves idols and one that becomes a pagan and an idol worshipper. So I think the Rambam is telling us this because we shouldn't become confused. And we shouldn't be puzzled, how can it be that Avodah Zarah is so severely treated when there's an aspect of ourselves that can see that but at the end of the day, these are fellow travelers seeking the divine. And the Rambam says, true, there is an aspect of fellowship here, but the end result of this is a complete catastrophe. So I think this is one point that the Rambam is saying. The second point, I think, the reason the Rambam is saying is because the truth is that this isn't just an ancient debate. This remains a lived concern to this day. If one looks at the history of the sister or daughter faiths of Judaism and the critiques that have been voiced against halachic Judaism throughout history until this day, even within Judaism itself, they really come down to many of these points. The first is it's very hard for us as humans to relate to an abstract God, to a God who we're not allowed to give physical imagery to. We're not allowed to ascribe or over-ascribe character traits and personality to. And one of the ways of dealing with this is to throw out that limitation, and perhaps one can popularize religion in so doing. So if we could adopt a faith in which we can ascribe to HaKadosh Baruch Hu human feelings and perhaps even find it moving that he has adopted the persona of a human being, as Christianity argues, and went through suffering and the like, maybe this gives an accessible spirituality which appeals to people and can be a popularization of faith. And therefore the Rambam is acknowledging that this critique or this challenge or this difficulty in pure monotheism remains to this day. How do we emotionally connect? How do we serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu? And in some respects, in a sense, the whole Torah is an answer to that question, which is trying to allow us to build connection to true spirituality on the one hand, without, on the other hand, throwing away the truth of monotheism, in which Hashem is the Borei Olam, is the creator of the world, and ultimately we as his finite creatures, that the gulf and the gap that lies between us and him is infinite one. So this sort of balance between a transcendent God, Hashem, who is removed ultimately from us on the one hand, and yet an immanence, an awareness that we carry within ourselves, at Tzelem Elokim, a godliness and an ability to touch the divine, to strive towards the divine, in a sense is the tension that lies at the heart of the whole of human existence. There's a part of us that can sing on a Friday night, we've got this longing, if one is sensitive to one's inner spirituality, one is aware of this desperate longing for union with the divine, to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to achieve things of real worth and real meaning, to achieve transcendence. We live a life in a sense as a contradiction in its core, in which we feel there's a part of ourselves that's spiritual, that's eternal, that can achieve something of reality, that can touch infinity. On the other hand, here we are, bound in flesh and blood, and crawling on earth for a limited lifespan, very aware that there's forces within us that are profoundly materialistic and physical and animalistic even. So much of Yiddishkeit is about navigating these tensions within us, whether it's Yom Noraim when we're thinking about Teshuvah and failure, whether it's Bereshis when we're thinking about Gan Eden and the expulsion of Gan Eden, or whether it's here in Lecha when we're thinking about Avraham's journey towards a relationship with Hashem. Sorry, yeah.
Does that then mean that Rambam suggesting that Avodah Zarah actually began from an acknowledgement of Hashem, and therefore channeling that acknowledgement in the incorrect way. Because I thought the rationale of the Zohar was a repudiation, a rejection of Hashem.
So what you're saying is entirely correct. That is exactly the Rambam's point. That the journey of Avodah towards Avodah Zarah starts off with a in some respects positive desperation for spirituality that then gets mischanneled and misdirected. The end result of that is a complete repudiation of Hashem, absolutely. But the impulse behind it has aspects of positivity to it, and that's why there's this unique danger in Avodah Zarah, because it's an attempt to bridge the gap between the frustration that a searching human being should feel towards this terrible pain of distance from the divine and the gap. The tragedy of it is that it's selling oneself out, because instead of feeling that frustration, acknowledging it, and taking the long and arduous path, instead it's a shortcut which ends up losing it. This, by the way, is of course why Avodah Zarah remained a living concern through the era of the Nevi'im. In the same times in history, when people 40 days earlier had the Matan Torah, throughout Nevi'im had the presence of prophecy in their midst, and daily miracles taking place in the Beis HaMikdash, and awareness of the presence of the Shekhinah and Manai HaKavod, and yet could still drift towards Avodah Zarah, because behind Avodah Zarah lies a real concern. And the Rambam puts it in Hilchos Avodah Zarah because he considers this fundamental to understanding the halachas of Avodah Zarah. There's not many other occasions where the Rambam starts with halachas with a history, and when he does, we always need to analyze it. The Rambam does this in Hilchos, in the halachas of Ishus, of marriage. The Rambam starts off by saying how marriage used to be pre-Matan Torah and how marriage is now. So every time the Rambam does that, there's a reason why he thinks it's relevant for us, even in the post-Sinai world, in the post-halachic system, in the system once there is halacha, to still understand what people did before halacha and how that attempt didn't end up creating a sustainable relationship to each other. Essentially, both in the realm of relationship, both in the realm of bridging the unbridgeable, right? The desperate urge we as humans face to connect to the other with a small o, and the other with a capital O is the two occasions, to the best of my knowledge, where the Rambam contrasts halachic answer to the question with a non or pre-halachic answer to the question.
Yeah. People feel they can only connect through intermediaries. In other words, that was really that was.
Yes, but even before intermediaries is actually stage 2. Maybe I shouldn't have whizzed through this halacha. The Rambam says there's a number of stages. Stage 1 is I don't need an intermediary in terms of mediating my relationship to Hashem, but I can't directly show appreciation and honor to Hashem without showing honor to his creatures. Stage 2 is I'm now going to use the creatures, the sun, the moon, and stars as intermediaries. Stage 3 is to forget the intermediaries and solely connect to them.
I'm going on to say that the Christians, to a certain extent, still use intermediaries, certain parts of Christianity through the priest.
And through, in some respects, the whole belief in somehow God giving himself or expressing himself through a physical human being, which is one of the great sellable points of Christianity, meaning it allows an emotion that we can't access. It's very moving to hear about, he shares in the suffering and the experiences and desperation, and Christianity says that's what allows one to relate. But from our point of view, that's from Torah's point of view, that's throwing out the that's stage 1 of Avodah Zarah. And on my Sunday morning series, that's why I spoke about exactly how halachas define Christianity. It doesn't fit a neat category because of that problem. On one hand, very strong and monotheistic. On the other hand, stage 1 of the Rambam. Okay, so this is but absolutely yes. In Catholicism, the idea of the priest and so on, there's other aspects of it. Yeah.
It's going to be controversial and wonder whether Hasidism also may be a little bit veering in that.
So I don't want to go too far into it, but when one looks at the early literature of the Misnagdim and the attack on Hasidus, one of the points that was raised was, what is this concept of a tzaddik? What's this concept of kivrei tzaddikim? And is this going over the line and using an intermediary? Now of course, several hundred years on, we've come to realize and there's different paths to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But there was definitely suspicion around this idea, and the attacks forced Hasidus to formulate more carefully. Okay, so what exactly do we mean about the role of a tzaddik? That was a vital step. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, So that's stage one of the Rambam. Stage two of the Rambam, at the end of Halacha base, is where the Avraham is introduced, and I put this in bold. It's literally the middle of source one, and the Rambam says, or in number two, in the English in paragraph 2, in the Hebrew paragraph base, that ends that. Val derech there, and on this way, the world was rolling. Hitkalkel means to roll. The world was rolling. Until the pillar of the world, Avraham Avinu, the patriarch Avraham, was born. It's an interesting title, by the way, for Avraham, pillar of the world. Maybe if we have time at the end, we'll come back to where the Rambam ascribes to, why the Rambam gives this title to Avraham. I mean, we could give many titles of Avraham. Pillar of the world is an interesting title to take. Now the Rambam says as follows. Halacha Gimel is very interesting. When this mighty man was weaned, very interesting language also. I mean, Avraham ended up as a mighty man. I think that's a fair title, but also an interesting one. But when he's weaned, he's still a little baby. But when this to be mighty man is weaned, weaning is when a child ceases being a suckling, normally at age 3 in those times. So it says, he began exploring and thinking in his mind, even though he was a child, thinking day and night. He was wondering, how can the sphere, the heavenly bodies, revolve constantly, and nothing is controlling it? And who would cause it to turn? It can't stand by itself. He had no teacher, no one to inform him about anything. His parents, the whole people, his mother, his father, they're all serving idols. He was worshipping amongst them. And his heart was exploring and understanding until he arrived at the true path. He understood through his own straight reasoning the path through all of this. And then he knew that there's one God who causes everything to happen. He knew that the whole world was making a mistake. Etc. Why they made a mistake. And then he finishes off in the bold in the last lines of source 1. The Ben Avayim Shama Hika Avram Boyer. It was the Rambam was 40 years old when he recognized Hashem. So here the Rambam describes the Rambam's journey, and we in a few moments are going to unpick and try in a little bit more detail, understand what his journey was exactly consisted of. All I want to mention for now is just hear the depth of effort that he puts into it. And I'm saying he's lachshov yom v'layla. He's thinking day and night. He's constantly pondering. This is a hard struggle for him. He didn't get this easily. In source 2, on page 1 near the bottom of the page, there's a memoir of Rav Chisda, in which Rav Chisda said to Avini, Gemili, we have a tradition that Avodas Kachavim Davram, that the tractate on Avodah Zarah, on idol worship Avram, Arba Meis Pirkin Have, it was 400 chapters. So again, we don't know exactly what that means. What tractate is Avini is Rav Chisda referring to? But what it's saying is, don't think Avram got here easily. One way of understanding it anyway is it's a 400 chapter book that he wrote in order to get there. And it's a mighty tome. It's enormous hard work. Whether this is meant literally or figuratively is hard to know. That the Maral famously, and many other Mepharshim actually, point out that there's certain number patterns that appear in Chazal and in the Torah again and again. And these number patterns either are literal or figurative, but represent certain ways of looking at life. So, for example, in the concept of Chumash, we would take these literally, but they're not a coincidence that these are the numbers that emerge. So, for example, to clean away the old world, it takes 40 days of flood. For the Jewish people to be reconstituted and recreated in the womb of the desert takes 40 years. The Meraglim, of course, runs around for 40 days. Halachically, Chazal understand that a fetus in the womb from conception for the first 40 days is Maya Ba'alma. There's no limb formulation that gets appearing. Therefore, halacha just has the status of liquid. The first buds of limbs appearing occurs around day 40. But the 40 days is sort of the birth of something new, the creation of something new. And so there are many numbers like this. 70 is the number used for generations, and so on and so forth. Moshe, of course, is up there on Har Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights. In other words, to bring spirituality down, for the creation and reception of the Torah by human beings takes 40 days. So 40 is one of these significant numbers. 10 is a significant number also. It's the full cycle, it's a minyan, it's the point where things are gathered, it's Aseret HaDibros. So 400 could well be a sort of symbolic number in Chazal, which is a combination of 40 is bringing something new into existence, and 10 it's every aspect of existence. It's hard to know, but either way, Rav Chisda says that there's a tradition that I don't think Avraham got that easily. There's enormous effort that's invested in finding the truth. Now, the next thing that's very interesting is a famous medrash. And this is at the bottom of page 1. The Medrash brings two opinions as to what age Avraham recognized HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the first opinion is Ben Aboim, he's 40 years old. And the second opinion is Ben Shalosh Shonim, he's 3 years old when he recognizes his creator. Now, I think 40-year-olds, we can all understand. 40 is in the prime of his life, and that's when he comes to recognize HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Again, 40 is an interesting number. Is it a symbolic number, literal number? But this is what it says. 3-year-olds, 3 years is more difficult to relate to. What does it mean that at 3 years old he came to recognize Hashem? And if we take the Medrash on face value, which this is what the Medrash may be saying, it's saying he was a child prodigy, he was a genius. It's true, most of us at 3 aren't able to arrive at complex reasoning. Avraham was able to do so. You know, you just need to Google, I think I've mentioned this before in a different context actually, you just need to Google child prodigy and you can see that there are rare individuals once a century, a child at 3 who's able to compose a concerto or play 15 games of chess in their mind at the same time or innovate new theories of calculus and so on. So there are rare individuals who are of genius ability who are able to achieve outstanding feats. That's how one would understand the Medrash. The Rambam, however, takes a different stance on the matter. It's very interesting. The Rambam says, when did Avraham begin exploring and questioning? When he was weaned. What age is weaning? 3. When did he arrive at recognition of Hashem? The truth is there's different sides in the Rambam, but in the version we're using in the text, at 40. In others, he's paskening like both versions in the Medrash. And he says at 40, Avraham arrived at his conclusion, but at 3, he began questioning. Now, anyone who knows 3 years old, an intelligent 3-year-old, this is perfectly possible. This is the Emperor's New Clothes. Avraham is a 3-year-old who's far more driven by a desire for truth, far more than average. And at 3, he begins saying there's something weird here, like this doesn't make sense. I mean, these are dolls. Why are we bowing down to these dolls? What's going on? And he begins asking his parents, and he becomes an ever more nudnicky, irritated child to all those around him. He's constantly probing and questioning and saying this doesn't make sense. And perhaps we imagine the parents in desperation taking him to the priest. He'll sort you out and he'll give the answers and so on and so forth. And Avraham, that's how the Rambam resolves these two Medrashim. At 3, he begins questioning. At 40, he arrives at a conclusion. To me, this emphasizes the point of the Rambam now to just realize what it takes to be an Avraham Avinu, because it's 37 years of searching. That's how long it takes to write a 400 chapter book. In other words, it's a significant effort. For day and night, he's constantly harried by this. He's constantly stressed. He's constantly pondering in his mind again and again and again and again. What sort of universe do we live in? How do I make sense of this? How can this mythology I've been taught about the sun and the moon and the stars really make sense? That something wrong, something doesn't make sense. And really, to me, there's something very profound in this, because all of us in our lives face spiritual challenges, difficulties, trials, and we feel, and they're genuinely dauntingly hard. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what it means to be a human being. The difference between Avraham and the rest of us is he doesn't give up. Because you can imagine at some point between 3 and 40, he would say, okay, I need to chill. Like, there's something wrong with the system, but I'm not going to get the answers. And it's time to start living. Like, how long can you continue just constantly thinking and working on this? And what's unique about Avraham is he doesn't give up. He's also confident, as it were, to throw out what everyone else is doing without having answers. Very often in life, and I'm sure we've all had experiences of this, it could be in professional lives, in other areas of life, something's not right about this model you're putting forward, something's not going to work about this proposal, something doesn't feel healthy in this relationship, wherever it is, but I don't have any other solutions, so I might as well go with it. It doesn't necessarily make sense. Maybe there's a middle position, which is, I need to acknowledge this is wrong, this doesn't work, and then we need to find the other solution. It's not an argument for the correctness of position A that I've ruled out position B, because if A isn't completely right, maybe there's C, D, E, F out there that works. So the ability to be an Avraham who for 4 decades, for 37 years, is able to say to everyone, what you're doing is wrong. So they say, so Mr. Avraham, so what's your answer? I don't know. But what you're saying doesn't make sense. Something doesn't work. That's an incredible strength. So this is Avraham's search. 37 years of intense effort, in which he manages to reverse the course of history, turn back this unhealthy drift of paganism that had occurred for understandable and relatable spiritual meanings, and emerge as an Avraham Avinu. This is the story that the Rambam tells us, and that Chazal tell us in their idea of Avraham searching for Hashem from 3, as the Rambam understands it, from 3 to 40.
I was going to say that the first generation, of course, 10 generations actually, who went wrong, Enosh and so on, were all wiped out in the flood. So
Yes.
was there anybody around with a memory of that? Noah obviously was a tzaddik, but it did occur to me the 3 sons, Shem,
Shem Common Office. Well, not Eva, but Eva's not yet born post-Mabul,
yes.
but Shem Common Office. No, because Enosh is a pre-Mabul figure.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to tell you, I've wondered long about this in the Rambam, because the Rambam explains a deterioration that occurred pre-Mabul, but then how did the infection of paganism carry on? Did it go through, maybe not Shem, but perhaps Yafet and Eva and Chom? Is the Rambam describing how it happened once, but then there was a second, history repeating itself, which happens sometimes? I don't know. It's not. Is the Rambam of the view that there's some pre and post Mabul continuity to human civilization beyond Noach, as per some other thinkers? I don't know. It's not. The Rambam doesn't. I don't know the answer to the question. But there are some figures that survive, as a minimum. Shem Common Office and Noach himself. Yeah. Okay. The interesting thing, by the way, just again, I 1 year, maybe it's time for us to redo it. We looked with great care at the dates of the. I think we did in the Parsha shiur once. We had a table with the dates of the various things that occur, and working out from the Psukim how the dates work out. But as is well known, Avraham overlaps a significant amount of time with Noach. It's very interesting, 50 odd years. And yet, as far as we know, there's no records of conversations between them. Of course, from Noach emerged the whole of humanity. If people have struggles to remember the name of their grandchildren, poor Noach had an impossible task. Noach, as we know, again, we have to be sensitive to how we view Noach. But Chazal voiced the concern that he was a bit of an isolationist. He doesn't seem to have had an impact on his generation. And post-Mabul, we don't find him impacting. Noach is still around when Nimrod, or whoever else it is, leads the Dara Flogger rebellion, and we don't find Noach taking any part in that. He's a completely quiet voice. Even Shem and Eva, who themselves are armed on Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, they're not giants on the world stage. Avraham is a giant on the world stage. He's striding up and down the length and breadth of Eretz Yisrael, and Vayikra b'Shem Hashem is this constant refrain that we hear. He's calling out in the name of Hashem. He's bringing people into his tents. He's doing all sorts of things. Shem and Eva don't do that, so they're not on Avraham, but they do set up a yeshiva. So they're quietly sitting in their corner. Again, we don't know exactly what they were learning in the yeshiva, but there's some pathways of spiritual development which are important, so important that Yaakov wants to go and learn there also. So they have a little corner, a quiet corner, where students who are seekers go and meditate, reflect, learn, whatever they do there. This is what they do in Yeshiva Shem Eva. So at least they set up a yeshiva. Noach doesn't become a Rosh Yeshiva. Right? Noach doesn't do any of that. So it seems that we have no record anyway of Avraham encountering Noach, and the Rambam says this explicitly, that Avraham didn't find anyone to teach him. He didn't have access to these traditions that presumably Noach and Shem and Eva had. Yeah, sorry. Gets a raw deal, bad press. Yeah.
The fact that there is, yeshiva that's being set up, that in itself is some form of influence on the world that's around. Okay, it's not that from Avinu's way of going. Yes.
Look, and that's why I said that we have to be careful how we speak about Noach, because Chazal themselves say these two contrasting stances. Noach ish tzaddik tomim oy b'dor Yosef. On the one hand, living in a generation like Noach, what a fantastic achievement. On the other hand, we don't find him trying to engage in Kirov or outreach like an Avraham does. We don't find him davening for them like an Avraham does with the Sodom. So, look, Noach, who else has at their hesped on their stone, their matzeva, Hashem himself describing him as Noach ish sadik, as a kimis halach Noach, he walked with God. So you don't get better than that. So Chas v'shalom, none of us are going to speak about our shared ancestor Noach in any way negatively. But Chazal do voice that there's something missing in the Noach story. You can't help but read the story, and you don't find an encounter where an Avraham stands up for Sodom and argues with them. You don't find an outreach, and Chazal were capable of taking that sort of nuanced approach in which, on the one hand, he's Noachish Sadik some over there himself, on the other hand, there's something missing in the story.
Modern psychology terms, he was completely broken by this experience.
Yeah.
The world destroyed around him. Maybe it was a great.
Yeah, I think the two Pshatim and Chazal agree about the fact that he was passive, and they're arguing as to what is it a chesaron and a lack in him that he didn't do this, and therefore had he been in the generation of Avraham, he would have been less than Avraham, or is it a greatness in him that he could survive such trauma? Yeah, I mean, this ties in also to discussion about what happened to Noach after the flood and why the Torah tells us this terrible story of him getting drunk and the shameful episode there and him retreating. There are many that look at it and say he was post-flood. He was just completely he was traumatized. It was too much to go with. So again, it's always a bit of a balance using sort of modern day sort of pop psychological terms around analysis of Nach, but there's definitely something around this that's going on in the story. I mean that's clear, and Chazal are sensitive to that. Okay, so this is what we know of Avram's journey on an external sense. What do we know about his internal journey? So there's a medrash which can really be read in two ways. And this is the medrash at the top of page 2. And again, we have very, very few sources about what Avraham was thinking and how he reasoned. And there's just a few medrashim, a few traditions that Chazal had about what Avraham's thought process was. Here the medrash says one of his thought processes, Moshul, this is the top of page 2, a very, very important medrash, by the way. This I do want to read this inside. Moshul echad. Shahaya over b'makom. This is a mashal of one who's walking from place to place. V'ra bira achat deleket, and he saw a light mansion. A bira is a mansion, and deleket was hadlik, like the hadlik Lecha Shabbos, a light. Omar, so Avraham said, Toma, can one really say shabira zu v'lo manhig, that this fortress is without a leader? Therefore, hits it Olav Baal Habira. The owner of the fortress peered out at him. Omaloi, he said to him, Ani Baal Habira, I am the master of the fortress of the palace. So this is the mashal. Someone is walking along the road. They see a lit up palace, and they say this can't have got here by itself. There has to be someone around who created this, who did this, who leads this. And at that point, the owner of the palace reveals themselves to this passing traveler. Kach, similarly, Avraham Avinu said, is it possible that this world is without a leader? Hits it all of HaKadosh Baruch Hashem peered out at him and said to him, Anihu Baal Ha'olam, I am the master of the universe. So in this short medrash, there's an immense amount to analyze. It's not a simple medrash at all. The medrash really has two parts, and each of those two parts have two parts. There's 4 components to it. It has a moshel as a parable, and an analogy to what Avraham experienced. And it's not entirely clear what the medrash is bringing out from this analogy, why it needed this analogy. Doesn't really clear. I mean, could have said it without an analogy. Avraham looked at the world and said, could it possibly be a world without a designer? Could it be a world without a creator? And Hashem reveals himself to it. It's not quite what the medrash says. And in turn, there's 2 parts in each story. There's the question of the questioner. Where did this palace? How is this a light palace there? What's going on over here? Where's the manhig, the owner or director of this palace, and the owner of the palace revealing themselves to the person? Similarly, Avraham says what's going on in this world, and Hashem reveals himself to Avraham. So this is also a question. Exactly how to translate the medrash, and we'll come to this in a moment. So there's much to analyze in the medrash. Given your question, I'll zoom in on that, and I'll start with that, and then we'll get back to the other as I was going to bring out. There's also a translation problem over here. The medrash is often read as saying that you have a lit up and a light palace. Dolek, like lahadlik nashas, and a lit up palace. In which case, it's the Medrash way of saying, you picture the scene, the imagery of the Moshel is very powerful. The travelers traveling at light, and suddenly they come across a blazing building, a building with every room, out of every room is lights are burning. They see it shining as a beacon of civilization from the distance, and they say there must be, this didn't come into existence by itself. There must be someone there behind it. That's the metaphor of the Medrash. Now, in that case, what it's really saying is it's some version of argument from the design. That's the philosophical thought process. Avraham is saying, look, palaces don't pop into existence from nowhere. There's some being that brings it into existence and runs it. And similarly, worlds don't pop into existence from nowhere. The world is analogous to this lit up building. And it's an argument from design. Now, there is no more sophistication in arguments of design put forward by this Medrash than is commonly recognized. There is a problem in the argument of design in the world, in which the argument of design says when you see complexity, there must be a cause behind it. Complexity doesn't just pop into existence by itself. There must be a designer there. The problem with design and complexity is it has to be for something. In other words, what makes something designed is only if it's designed for something. In truth, any random pile of rubble is also very, very complex. Each piece is in a particular position. The reason we don't see it as designed is because nothing would be changed if the pieces were in different positions. What do I mean nothing would be changed? I mean, they would be changed. The bricks would be in different positions. So what does complexity mean? The answer is complexity for a particular purpose. Complexity, the argument of design works not just on the fact that there's lots of bits and pieces, but that these bits and pieces somehow work together to create functionality, something is emerging from it. And it may be that this is the point that the Medrash is bringing out in this shiur of Lecha, and using the metaphor of the traveler, because the traveler is traveling, he's out in the wilderness, he's in the dark and the cold, and then he sees this palace all alight, this big building all alight, and he sees it as a place of security, a place of sanctuary, a place of safety, a place of hospitality. And then he turns to it, and why is he saying there must be someone around? So there must be an owner, and there must be someone around and who will welcome me in. So Avraham is looking at the world, and he's saying, I see a world which is a home. It's a sanctuary for us human beings. We exist in this cold, dark, inhospitable universe, but in that inhospitable, dark universe, there's one blazing palace, a light with 1,000 candles, beaming out at the world, offering us a place of refuge and safety. That's a designed building. There must be a designer behind it. In other words, there is the argument from design is predicated on thinking that the world has a functionality to it. It's achieves something. That human existence is worthwhile. There's a point and a purpose to it. If you buy into that viewpoint, then this must be designed. If you adopt, I think, an unsustainable position of a complete meaninglessness to everything, then it's difficult to know exactly what to do with this argument. So this may be one way of reading the Medrash. There is an alternative way of reading the Medrash, which really comes from the same difficulty, which is if the Medrash meant argument for design, why talk about a light bira, a lit up palace? Just say a fancy palace, with lots of pillars and windows and doors, and that would bring out the same point. It's just a way of bringing out a complicated argument. By the way, Chazal were aware of the argument from design. Rabbi Kiva speaks about it. Rabbi Kiva said in a conversation he had with a Roman official, Rabbi Kiva said if you saw a garment, a beged, lying on the ground, you would say there must be a tailor, a seamstress. Someone must have made this garment. It didn't just magically appear, because a garment has complexity. It's got interwoven threads, and threads have to be spun and so on and so forth. This doesn't just appear by itself. So Chazal were open to the argument from design. And this, as I said, in version 1 of this Medrash, this may be what they are saying of one of Avram's reasonings was argument from design. The second way of reading the Medrash is quite counter that. And in this reading, it means shiur de Lecha as in a burning building. And the building is burning, it's a flame. And travelers walking along, and suddenly they come across a building that's burning. And they say, is it possible this building is burning and there's no manhig there? It doesn't say in the Medrash there's no creator. Argument from design is an argument for a creator. The Medrash doesn't say, there below Banoi. There can't be a building without a builder. There can't be a building without a designer, without an architect, without a creator. It says there can't be a building without a money. Like, what's going on over here? This place gone mad. The building's burning and no one's doing anything. At that point, the owner, the palace comes out and says, "Don't worry, I'm here. I'm trying to sort things out. There's a purpose to the madness. There's a reason going on." In this model, Avraham looks at the world and he sees the world burning. He says, "I don't understand why this is a crazy, monstrous world. There's misery, there's suffering, there's difficulty, there's stress, there's travails. Life's not easy. Like what's the point of this all? Where's it going? We're like ants on an ant hill, scurrying around, busying ourselves, stressed all day, rushing just to provide food. And comes the winter, we're all gone. There's no. This is like a burning, crazy, meaningless existence. What's driving Avraham's search is a passionate desperation for meaning and sense. We humans, we need to string narrative out of fact. We can't live with chaos and randomness. When we see suffering, we can respond in one of two ways. Either it's just chaos, it's just complete madness, or there has to be something we can draw out of this, some direction, some purpose, something we can take home out of this in order to continue. Again, I want to be conscious of this topic because people go through tough times. The world goes through tough times nationally in the lives of people still alive today. They're the worst catastrophes to strike the Jewish people. So one has to be careful how one speaks about this. But there are certain threads that often run through the narrative of people that emerge from really difficult experiences and manage to rebuild. And the thread is often drawing out a thread of meaning and being able to draw something out of this. A conviction, famously Viktor Frankl writes about this in Man's Search for Meaning. He wrote this as someone who went through the camps and as a survivor, and says that this holding on to this pillar of existence, this unshakable foundation, that there's still meaning that we can find in life, even when it's really tough and really horrible. And even if we've lost control of almost everything around us because of the difficulties we're going through or the external persecution, nonetheless, we can still make choices about how we respond, what sort of person we want to be, whether we can find an inner goodness within us, that sort of passionate search for meaning. This is a second reading in the Medrash, that what drives Avraham's recognition of the Creator is either everything is meaningless, there's no narrative, there's no sense, this is just a chaos, or there has to be a manhig here. There has to be a manhig, a driver, a director, a noheg, someone who's moving in a direction, that there's a purposefulness and a narrative and a meaning that can be drawn out of this. And this is what leads Avraham to recognition. So these are two very powerful ways of relating to the Medrash. But by the way, in the second reading, I think we begin getting an intuition, and I think it's more than that, but I think we begin getting an intuition about why the Rambam labels Avraham as Amudoi Shalom and the pillar of the world. Because in this model, belief isn't just an important thing that we should believe in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's Avraham arguing that the foundation to sanity, the foundation of the ability of humans to function, is belief. In other words, if we don't have a lived experience of the transcendent, if we don't have a direct connection to meaning and eternity, our life is just going to flounder. Then we live in this crazy burning building, and we're just completely lost, we're completely confused. How do you deal with it when you're this traveler turning up in this burning building? Unless you can find the manhig, the creator in one model, or the director in the other model. So this is a second layer of depth to the Medrash. There is, however, a third point in this Medrash. So again, what ostensibly looks like a very simple story in the Medrash has a third layer. And the third layer is very, very profound. There's a significant debate that really spans the history of Jewish thought as to what the relationship between revelation and rationalism is in the role of us human beings. And the Torah sort of engineers this problem, this confusion, in a sense, in how it presents to us our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. On the one hand, we have minds that reason, minds that think, that are logical, that come to conclusions, that philosophize, that reason, that speculate. And on the other hand, we have revelation. We have the idea of HaKadosh Baruch Hu appearing to us and Matan Torah, giving us the Torah, prophecy that existed in the times of the Nevi'im. What exactly is the relationship between the two? and what is meant to be our primary mode of connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Is our main connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu through reason, through the mind, or through the heart, through emotion? Is the main connection to belief, or the main route to belief, through philosophy, for those who are up to it, or is it through tradition? We stood at the feet of Har Sinai and received the Torah. What is our main vehicle to spirituality? So again, now's maybe Sunday morning is a forum where we'd look at that in more detail. But this is a running thread throughout, possibly already in the Torah Shebechsav itself, and certainly in Torah Sheba'al Peh, through the eras of the Tanoim, and it's alluded to in Mesachas Avos, different opinions around this, through the Amoraim and Gemara, through the Rishonim, the Rambam famously taking a very strong stance on one side, believing that philosophical approaches are the real route to the divine, and the critics of the Rambam who very strongly disagree. But it's really there in the Gaonim, Sadia Gaon writes works of philosophies, and on the other side, you have the Mukabalim, you have figures like the Kuzari, who hopefully we'll get to in a few minutes, from Yehuda Halevi. So this is a very long-running debate in between different approaches. The Medrash seems to be also grappling with this issue, because note that the Medrash doesn't say that Avraham comes up with the argument for design or the argument for meaning, however, whichever model one understands, and it derives from that a conclusion of the belief of Hashem. He says all it leads to is a frustration, a vague sense there has to be something there. There has to be a manhig. It's impossible there's no manhig. So I can know through philosophy, through reason, that there has to be someone out there, but I can't know them. I can know of them. I can know there's this void there, there's this being that must be filling this gap, but I can't know them. I can't connect to them. But what happens when I create the gap in my life? What happens when I use my mind to arrive at a reason that there has to be a Bora Olam or a manhig out there? Then miyad takes it sort of Bal Habira. Immediately, the owner of the palace reveals themselves to Avraham. So the Medrash seems to be mixing reason, philosophy, thinking, logic, and revelation in Avraham's journey, Avraham's experience. In other words, the Medrash seems to be taking a stance. I'm not saying this is the only approach to these matters, but this seems to be the approach to the Medrash, that philosophy and reason can only get you so far. Even an Avraham Avinu can't get to know Hashem. He can't build a relationship with Hashem just through reason. He can become aware that there must be a God out there, but he can't experience the God in there. He can't connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu without revelation. So a transcendent God, the knowledge of a God, Avraham spent 37 years questioning and searching desperately until he comes to the conclusion there must be someone, but now something else happens. Miyad hates it, sort of Abira. Immediately there's a sense of connection and direct link. So this is very, very important and very, very profound. If this is a midrashic answer to this philosophical debate that's existed through the generations, at least this particular Medrash seems to take a stance on it, which seems to be saying one needs a balance of both. And Avraham Avinu starts off his journey through reason, but there'll always be something missing unless one's privileged to have the Balabira opening up and saying hello to you. Sorry, did you?
Yes, so it sounds like you find that the philosophizing and the intellectualizing actually comes before as a preparation to sort of be able to.
Yes, that's what the Medrash seems to be saying. Yes, yeah. The Medrash seems to be saying that look, at the end of the day, we humans have been given minds for a reason. If we don't engage in thought, we're not going to get anywhere. But at least in Avraham's experience, after all that effort, then the revelation occurs. In some respects, one could argue that the debate between later thinkers, it isn't necessarily a debate about what an Avraham Avinu goes through, but what should we go through? Because we're now post-revelation. So now that we've had to Sinai, now that Hashem has said, hello, I'm there, Lech, Hashem, Lecha, maybe then we don't need to, maybe it's ridiculous to go back to the philosophy. It'd be like a child having to philosophize the existence of their parents, but the parents are there. So, we're carrying you, we're hugging you, we're feeding you, what's with your philosophy? So it could be that the divide between the different schools of thought should more be seen as what's the way we ought to take an approach, as opposed to in an academic sense, what are the objective approaches out there. But either way, at least in Avraham's experience, the Medrash is saying he started off with his mind, and only then revelation could follow. I don't want to go too far into this, other than to say that I'm not going to have time to explore this in too much depth. I put another section here on page 2, which is called Our Search. Because in a sense, Neil, your question nicely leads into this, which is, okay, we're talking about Avraham's journey, but what can we extrapolate from Avraham's journey into our search for belief and emunah and connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Now, on the one hand, there's good reasons to have to argue for profound differences between how we should approach things and Avraham should approach this. Number one, Avraham lived in a pagan world. We live in a world where we're post-Sinai, right? Avraham lived in a world where he had to go through that route. We live in a world where we're post-revelation. Difference number one. Difference number two, most of us don't have the character traits and of an Avraham to engage in 37 years of thought in that manner. Difference number three, Avraham is a prophet. At the end of the day, Miyad hates us of Baal Habira, Hashem reveals himself to us. Do we still have access to Hashem revealing himself to us in our lives or not? So all of these are where the broader discussions begin, which is, okay, this is how Avraham did it, but what does it look like in 2022? On the other hand, Avraham is meant to be a role model. There's a reason the Torah is telling us about him, and maybe if this is a journey of Avraham, maybe this is a journey that's meant to teach us something. On the third hand, if I'm allowed one, the Torah doesn't tell us much about Avraham's journey, and there are significant thinkers, particularly to the best of my knowledge, only spelled out in the world of Hasidus, who suggest that this is why Avraham's journey isn't told to us, Avraham's search isn't told to us in Torah itself. Because don't forget, all we meet is Avraham at the end of Noach, and then Avraham suddenly, Lech, Hashem appearing to him. In fact, Lecha might be the point where hates of Baal Habira, where the owner of the castle. When did the owner of the castle say to Avraham, "Hello, I'm here"? You know, you're desperately asking, how can this castle be burning, or how can this castle be alight without a Baal Habira present? And then the manhig reaches out to Avraham and says, "I'm here." When did this manhig reach out to Avraham? The answer may be Lech Lecha, the beginning of this week, etc. In which case, there's everything missing. Why do we have to pick up scraps of clues from a Gemara and Avodah Zarah, about 400-volume book, and a couple of midrashim that we have about what Avraham philosophized? Why is the Torah not telling us about this journey? And the Divrei Chaim, the famed sons of and the founders of a very, very significant dynasty in Hasidus, says the answer is because that's not meant to be part of our lived journey as Jews. Avraham had a long and full life, right? He lived for 175 years. All sorts of things happened to him that we have no idea about. The Torah tells us 30, 40 incidences from his life. These are the stories that we're meant to learn from. Everything else is important. It's Torah, of course, it's Torah. It's very important to understand. That's why the midrashim discuss it. But those aren't the core features of an Avraham Avinu that we're meant to learn from. So the Divrei Chaim argues that this is why the Torah doesn't tell us about his journey, because Avram's journey from a Jewish point of view starts with the Lech Lecha. We live in a post-revelation world. In Avram's personal life, the revelation is the appearance of Hashem, Lech Lecha Mi'atzecha. On a national level, it's Har Sinai. But that's where the Jewish journey starts. We don't need to ask, where's the Baal Habira? We don't need to spend 37 years tearing ourselves up with how can the building be burning? This is the world gone crazy. That pain that we hear in Avram's cry in this reading the Medrash, we don't have to do that because Baruch Hashem, thank God, we live in a world where Hashem has already revealed himself. So none of this discussion is going to resolve. There's a reason why this has been debated for 3,500 years of Jewish thought, but nonetheless, the Medrash is interesting in at least revealing to us, at least on Avram's level, what the Baal Medrash understood about this. Let me just try and use the 5 minutes that are remaining just to mention a few other points, and then we'll finish. There is a famous medrash, and the reason it's famous is because Rashi brings it, that comments on the instruction to Avraham of Lech Lecha Mi'atzecha U'Meladetcha U'Beisavicha Al Haaretz Asher Areka. Go from the home of your father, your birthplace, your country of origins, to the land that I will show you. So the Medrash picks up on the strangeness of this instruction to Avraham and asks, why does it say to the land that I will show you? Say, go to Eretz Yisrael. I mean, that's where he's going to go to. Go to Eretz Canaan. That's the way you give instructions. And the Medrash answers that Hashem didn't tell him where to go. He said, I will show you. In other words, at no point in the journey has Hashem said, you're going to get to Eretz Canaan. In other words, at each stage, I'm going to show you. Which, if you think through to the conclusions, therefore has to mean, at each point, it's step by step, he's getting instructions. Because at each stage, it's go to the land that I will show you, I'll show you, I'll show you. At each point, he's being shown the land, but he's never told clearly, you're going to get to Eretz Canaan. So the Medrash, why? Why would you have this bizarre method of instruction? So the Medrash, in order that Avraham, to make it more precious for him, and to give him rewards for every step. This is the second source on page 2. Why didn't Hashem reveal to him where he was going to go? To make it beloved in his eyes and to give him reward for every step. That's what the Medrash says. Now, again, the Divrei Chaim from Sons comments in this medrash, and he says that it's a nice sweet medrash, but it almost seems childish. It makes it more precious, like a little child, like you've got a present coming, feel it on the outside. I'm not telling you it's a surprise and building up with anticipation. That's Avraham Avinu, and to give him rewards, it's like a game. I'll multiply the rewards. If I tell you just to go to Eretz Yisrael, you'll only get one reward. Go to Eretz Yisrael, that's one instruction. If I tell you every instruction, every step, then you'll get 1,000 rewards. Go get a taxi, drive to Heathrow, go to your check-in, go to school. So that's 1,000 instructions. Wonderful. Why does that increase his reward? So the Sons of Rebbe says that what Avraham is going through over here is a spiritual journey in parallel with his physical journey, and the whole point of this medrash of the Baal Habira reaching out to him is because they're things that you can't receive and understand till you're ready for them. And transcendence is always like that. Spirituality is always like that. It has to be step by step, stage by stage. There is no end goal which you can arrive instantly at, even if you're an Avraham Avinu, a world-class genius, a child prodigy at 3 who begins exploring things. Each stage, it has to be taken step by step, because it's always the lands beyond, it's always the promised lands, it's always the above, that which is transcendent. Avraham Avinu can't be told by Hashem where to head to, because he needs to connect to it. It needs to be a love affair. It's kedei l'chavavo. It has to be something he grows to love. You can't instantly grow to love something. It has to be a journey of layer by layer, revealing and uncovering and understanding and relating to and connected. It's to give a schar for every step. Schar doesn't mean an external reward, right? Again, it's a longer discussion what reward and punishment is. It's not that Hashem says, if you do good, I'll give you a sweet, and if you don't, I'll give you a slap. It's schar mitzvah mitzvah. The rewards of spirituality is how we mold ourselves and form ourselves and create ourselves something special. How do you do that to yourself? Only step by step, because it's always striving to the beyond, to the transcendent. Why did Hashem leave Avraham in torment for 37 years? Because it's only after those 37 years that Hashem could peer out at him and reveal himself to him. There's a journey. I've said this before in a different context, in Joshua context of other sedges. There's a reason why the Torah ends before they get to Eretz Yisrael. The story of the Torah, the narrative of the Torah, if the Torah is a travel book, if it's a book of a journey, really the Torah is a book of journeys. It's the journey of Avraham, it's the journey of Jewish people down to Egypt, up from Egypt. The frustrating thing about the book is it misses out the punchline. The story closes, story over, the end, before on the cusp of going into Eretz Yisrael. It's an amazing story, but we don't think about that, right? Because it's always the promised land. It's always that which is beyond. There's always that next step to get to, the next step to get to. And this says the Divrei Chaim is the next aspect of the medrash. It's Hashem miyad hates it on a balabir. By the way, the word hates it is a unique word. If it wasn't all words we'd use reveal, gilah, miyad ra'ah. Hates it, by the way, is linked etymology. Hates it means peers. Mates it bein acharakim, peering between the lattice. Thank you, I knew there was a posh word for it. Peering between the lattice. Hates is when you're just catching a glimpse, a tantalizing glimpse. By the way, it's used obviously in the imagery of shiur because of the tantalizingness of it, the almost erotic relationship, the sort of tantalizing glimpses of things, which then leads one to search for more and more and more and more. This is what happens. Hashem doesn't throw open and say, "Hello, here I am. Hi, I'm the owner of the castle." It's probably the medrash is trying to be evocative of this language of hate. You've got the traveler. They arrive at the castle and they see it lit up, and then they say there must be someone around. Where does the owner of the castle peer out from? From behind the lattice work. Doesn't just fling open the doors. He sort of pulls open the hatch in the doorway and looks out and says, who's this distant traveler over there? So hates it. The Balabi was peering out. It's step by step by step. This is the imagery the Divrei Chaim and Sons draws out of this medrash. I've left the whole of section 2 out of this. I haven't got up to that. Our search. You can do one of two things. One is read the sources yourself, or two, Mitzvah Hashem, November 2023, Parsha Lecha. I'll give part 2 of the shiur because I've run out of time, and we'll look at the continuation. Actually, how does this translate into our lives and to our search, and what can we draw out of Avraham's journey into us? But that's part 2, and I've saved myself having to prepare shiur for next year, so I'm delighted about that also.
Yeah. Probably never heard of. It's not mentioned in the Torah.
Yeah. There's always there's always pshuta shemikra and a depth of medrash. By the way, the Ramban argues that Avraham knew where Eretz Canaan was because it depends again on exactly how you work out the datings and how you understand the route of his journey. And yeah, so but the medrash either way is taking. That's the stance the medrash is taking. That there's a metaphor behind this unusual language that's being used. There may be a pshuta shemikra explanation also for sure. Yeah. Shkoyach. Thank you very much. Thank you.